This is the Kreg Rip Cut saw jig, and this is a tested tool review. This is the Kreg, it's the Rip Cut saw guide. It's made for just a regular skill saw or circular saw. And it's a simple jig, and it's got a sled that works on the bottom of your saw. And this is the older version. Now, if you look this up, you won't find this version unless you find one on eBay or something. This is the older version. I've had it for a really long time. And it's similar to the version they've got out now, but all the complaints that we had on this one, at least most of them, they've addressed. One of them is this flimsy plastic and these flimsy locks. They have not addressed that. The new one has the same style locks. The improvement they made is it's a wider shoe, and it has a lock on the side where you can set it. If you're ever going to go back and put it on the saw, they've got a lock where you can set it up and go back, and it'll be preset all the time. The lock will go on either side of the new shoe, which is a great improvement. Now this will be in my Amazon store. The newer version of it, they run around $40 on Amazon. You can, I think Lowe's, I've seen them at Lowe's. This comes from Lowe's. The newer version also has a wider foot over here with a hole cut out in it for you to put your hands in, and I don't really like that, because somebody's going to put their fingers through it. They're going to have that one finger sticking out down here while they're holding it, and you're not supposed to put it lower than 1 inch when you set up to keep the saw from binding. But still, somebody's going to try it, and they're going to lose a finger. So I don't really like the idea of having the handhold in it. I kind of like this style design, but who knows? I've not tried the new one. So I do use a lot of Kreg products. I've got my Kreg jig, which I couldn't live without now, and I don't do finished carpentry, but I do make cabinets for my garage and cabinets for closets and things that don't have to be perfect. They're just carcasses, and then you don't have to have them beautiful, but you want them to be right, and this will help you make them reasonably right. This would keep it straight unless you just mess up yourself. And what I mean by that is there's just a slight bit of flex in the parts you can see, so you can get yourself out of line really quick if you don't. First you need to set it up right, but if you get it set up right and you go to moving it around or handling it wrong, you can still get your panel cuts off. And let me put this on the saw and show you what it does. When you go to put it on the saw, you just kind of set the saw underneath these little tabs. Now what you want to do, let me flip it over here. On this one, you've got to make sure that you've got your saw guard. It needs to be centered. Well, I'm going to have to do it without the... Now I've got the saw guide screwed down. It just holds down with these two little tabs. Now the newer version, this is wider, and these tabs cover the saw a little bit better. So now we can turn it up and see back here what I was talking about. You have to make sure it clears this guide or it'll bind, and that's no good when it binds. It's dangerous, and it can also affect your cut, but most importantly it's dangerous. Now anytime you go to put this on, make sure your cord is unplugged if you got a corded saw, and if it's a cordless tool, you're putting it on a cordless saw, make sure your battery's out, because you're going to be fiddling around with this blade a lot. You'll be moving it around and measuring off of it. What I mean by that is when you put the saw guide on, let me get a stand here. After you get the saw guide on, you want this to move freely. And also, the newer version sits just a tad flatter against the bottom of the saw. This one seems to, the shoe of this saw curves up a little bit, and that makes this curve up and pull away from the shoe. But the newer version has a little tab inside of the top that you can flip over, and it accounts for that. Now once you get it mounted on the saw good and square, you want to move this saw guide part all the way over. Well, if I can get it. It's really stiff. It's got sawdust in it. I've used this thing for years. I've had it for years, and I've not managed to break it yet. But you can see there's the blade. You bring this all the way over to it, but not put pressure on it. Just lightly touching it, if I can manage to get it to do that. Okay, I've got it up against it. I'm going to lock it down. Now I'm going to turn the saw over. And that red line should be zeroed with this edge right here. And it is, well, it's pretty close. Pretty close, but it looks like it may need to go over just a tiny little bit. Now when you move this back out, you should be able to use your ruler on the top of your saw guide. Now we need 14 1/4 for the shelves that we're making. That's just a random number, but that's how thick we're making it so we can make closet shelves, and then we'll put a front edge on it. That'll make them 15 inches. And I'll put that right on 14 1/4 in the center. Lock it down. Now I should be able to flip this over and measure from, on these teeth, you want to measure from this raised edge on these teeth, because these are carbide. You want to put it from the inside of the carbide, and it should be exactly 14 1/4. That's right on it according to that, but it's still in the center of the blade, and that's not enough. Put it up here on the other side. Yep, right in the dead center of the blade. Now you're going to lose a 32nd of material if you go with that. So we're going to have to turn it over and adjust again. Let's see where I'm at on. Well, actually, I wasn't on the quarter mark. Lock it down. Now, this is your primary setup, but once you get it set up, you need to cut all your panels at the same time that you need. That way you're getting the same cut. That's 14 1/4 on the edge of the carbide, which is what it needs to be. The carbon tips. Now this thing is set up for 14 1/4 panels, which is what I had it set on before I took it apart. Now you're ready to cut a panel. Now, all I've ever used this for is ripping plywood. And you can rip, looks like from 1 inch all the way up to 24 inches. And 24 inches is important because you can rip down the dead center of this plywood, cut it completely in half, and sometimes you need to do that. But you don't want to set it exactly on 24 inches when you rip, because you're going to take a little more off of one side and you do the other. You need to mark your line and then set your saw guide in the dead center of that line. That way you take the kerf out and you'll have just a slightly less than 24 inches on each side of your panel. Now, I'm going to do a little test first to make sure that I'm still at 14 1/4. Well, I better do something to my plywood before it dumps us out the floor. Now I've got a jack under the back side of the plywood to keep it from tipping. I'm just going to do a slight little test cut. You square this up on the edge of your panel. Let the saw stop. Got my ruler. 14 1/4 exactly. So that's where I want to be on my panel cut, because all my other panels are 14 1/4. I want to make them match. So ordinarily I would run the whole length of this panel. I'm just going to run it a little ways and show you how this saw guide works and how easy it is to handle. Now I'm not wearing safety glasses. The first thing I want to say is anytime you do any project like this, you're running a saw or anything, is put safety glasses on. I just didn't think about it. And that's me being a bad teacher. But we got 14 1/4, and it's going to stay true all the way down. I don't have to make a mark. I don't have to draw a line. I can set that saw guide up and I can cut these panels all day long at 14 1/4 inches. Now you don't have to use my measurement. You can cut your panels however you want to. But it's great for MDF, plywood. I don't know about the two-sided plywood, if I would use just a regular rip blade like I'm using. The plywood that's finished on two sides, you'll probably need a panel blade, or maybe even use it on a nice table saw. But my table saw is just a job site saw, and it doesn't have outfeed tables or nothing, so I can't rip plywood on it without a couple of people, and it's extremely dangerous that way. So this, I can set this up when I'm on the job somewhere. I can rip the plywood or whatever kind of panel it is I'm ripping. Rip it whatever width I need, up to 24 inches. Or if I need more than that, I could just take it off the other side or take it off this side and reduce my panel down to whatever width I need. It's very handy, very convenient. Like I said before, this is not the original design. They've upgraded it and they've kind of made it a little tighter in places, and it shows that they've tried to improve it, because this is the earliest version. I guess it's more of a prototype version, but it worked really well. If you watched our paint sprayer video, you'll see the cabinet that we made using this rip guide, and it's pretty handy. And the only thing about this older version is it doesn't have the slots in it for the saw guide. Now, Kreg has come out with a saw guide that goes all the way across the panel that the sled off of the new rip guide actually fits into. So you can use it for this rip guide, or you can put it in the wider saw guide that they've got, and it turns your saw into a track saw. And all you need is this jig, and then you just pick up the track later. But I'll put this in the Amazon link, of course. And I've also got, of course, I got some smaller Kreg pocket hole jigs that just clamp right to the panel. We put our kitchen counter and stuff with it, put it together, put all the trim around it. We've got that Kreg Crown Pro, and I've jacked around with that thing, and I'm baffled. It says it makes everything easier, but really on our saw, we've got these crown guides here, crown stops, and that's what I've been using instead of that thing there. I don't know what kind of wizardry it takes to master it, but I've tried once and I gave up and went back to these. And as long as you can actually, this is a compound dual bevel miter saw, you can actually cut your crown right side up with this or cut it flat, but all I do is put it in there upside down, make my cut, and take it to where I'm going. If I remember that that's what I'm doing, I don't get confused that way. And I've got used to doing it that way, so the Crown Pro is probably a great thing, but setting it up, seems like I would have to put me some outriggers out here that matched it a little bit better than these, that matched that Crown Pro, and it feels awkward when I'm running the miter saw, so I'll just stick the old way and go with it. But I really like this rig, and I'm anxious to try one of the new ones and the big track that adapts to the new system. And of course we'll talk about the Kreg jig one day when we're doing some panels, and you really can't beat that for panel work if you're screwing a cabinet together, because you can hide all your fasteners if you think ahead, and no one will ever see them when you put your little cabinets together. For my garage cabinets and these cabinets that goes in the closet, I'm probably going to build a pantry. As soon as finished plywood goes down a little bit, I'm going to make me a pantry with some of that veneer plywood. Got some of it here, but I don't have nearly enough. This is painted on one side and it's veneered on the other side. But when I bought that, it was $40 a sheet. Now I think it's $120 a sheet, so we'll not be buying that anytime soon. When I was talking earlier, I just had a job site saw. It's just got a folding stand. And it's only a 10-inch, and it doesn't have a very good plate in there for getting fine cuts. So it's not the greatest thing in the world. It's good for ripping rough lumber and things like we do on the job shop. Because, like I said, I'm not a trim carpenter or finish carpenter. But I do appreciate you guys riding along with me. And anybody that's not subscribed, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. That way, anytime we do another tool review, I know people tend to like our tool reviews better than they do our other content that we make. And this is not a video on how to use the tool. This is just a video on, well, I guess it is, but it's more of a review on how I use it. And I know there's a great many other uses for it, but I just use it for ripping panels. It seems to be better than trying to do it on a table saw, and it's a lot safer, in my opinion. So hit that like button if you don't care. Smash that notification bell. We try to do something on Sundays or Mondays. We try to do at least one a week. So check back with us, and I do appreciate you guys watching. This has been a tested tool review of the Kreg Rip Cut saw guide. Do appreciate you watching. Stay clean, everybody.